Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jonno White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jonno White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Janine Deakin. Janine is Executive Dean of the Faculty of Science and Technology at the University of Canberra in Australia. Welcome to the podcast, Janine.
Thanks, Jonno. It's great to be here.
So first of all, for our listeners, tell us a little bit about what you do as Executive Dean, and maybe a little bit about the faculties you head up, and and about the University of Canberra, because there may be people listening outside of Australia. Well, I know there are many outside of Australia who, may not be familiar with your university as well. So it's great to give everyone a bit of an overview.
Okay, sure. So I might start with what I do. So, being the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Science and Technology, I'm responsible for pretty much everything from the teaching program and making sure that our courses are accredited and that we're meeting all the higher education standards. I'm responsible for all the staff and making sure that they're getting the development they need, and just things are going smoothly for them. I'm responsible for overseeing the research that we do. So, in the Faculty of Science and Technology, we don't have just teaching, we do research as well. And it's making sure that, our staff have all the resources they need to do that research well, and that we're making the right connections with industry, because it's important that our research is applicable to the outside world, not just something that we're doing within a university, but has applications beyond the university. So our faculty has two sides to it. So we have two schools. We have the Science School and the School of Information Technology and Systems, and that makes up the Faculty of Science and Technology. And in science, we have particular strengths in environmental science, and we have research institute that's around applied ecology. And we also have a research group that's doing biomedical research. So they're kind of our two areas of main strength in science. And our courses sort of match our research strengths as well. So we have courses in medical science, biomedical science, and environmental science. And then on the technology side, we have a research group that's looking at human-centered technology, so how humans interact with technology. And that could be anything from robotics for rehabilitation, or it could be picking up on micro expressions from, picking up sort of depression. You're looking at the micro expressions of a person. So doing a little bit of filming and seeing how their expressions might display depression. And we also have a group that's emerging looking at digital inequalities, and how we can sort of have an impact in that sort of social change around digital inequalities. So there are certainly populations around the world who have that inequality. They're not exposed to the same digital infrastructure that we have here in Australia.
Fantastic.
And we also have a group. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just saying that's brilliant. It's great
And
to get
we
an
also,
overview. Please continue.
yeah, and so then we have our courses are sort of matching what we do in the research. So we have, degrees in data science and, sort of engineering, and how, we can become sort of network and software engineers from the engineering side. So, and general sort of information technology. So that's kind of where we are at. And then with the University of Canberra, um, we have an impressive title at the moment as the fastest rising university in Australia as far as the
Wow.
world rankings go. So we're doing really well. Yeah, and it's exciting because it's a young university, um, and we're doing quite well, and really pushing some boundaries with our research, and coming up to speed there.
Wonderful. Great to learn that about the University of Canberra, and great to start the podcast by encouraging people, listeners from all around the world, to check out the University of Canberra, and specifically the faculties you head up as well. So thank you for that overview. Let's chat about Janine. I love hearing people's stories, and for you, Janine, as you look back at your childhood and growing up, are there any moments from that season of your life that stand out to you as moments that really shaped you becoming the leader and the person you are today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, I was always, as a child, I was one of those people that people always came to with their problems. So I was always a great listener. And I think that's important in leadership, to be a listener. And I remember in kindergarten, I was kind of the person that was almost like a counselor, even though I was, only 5 years old. All the other kids would, if they had a problem, would come to me. And I think that's really shaped who I am now. So it's the same situation. I have my staff or students come to me, and sometimes it's just as a sounding board. They just need to offload. Um, and that's fine. So I think that's part of being a leader is really developing those listening skills.
Yeah, that's so true, and I identify that as well. I identify with that. Sorry, I remember for myself feeling, like a little bit of an old soul at different points, and which was uncomfortable. I remember one memory for me which stands out, which is it's so strange how clearly this one memory stands out for me. But I remember being down playing soccer down the road at a club that I used to play at, and I was probably, how old was I? Maybe 14, 13, 14. And I remember we were just doing a couple of laps across and back, and I remember looking at the other guys on my team and just thinking, man, why am I like so serious, or the way I think about things I feel is so different? Like there was just there was something of a wavelength with these other guys that at that time I thought of as a disconnect, but I've since realized, which is where I identify with what you said, feeling like people can come and have a chat to me similarly to what you said, where they can bounce things off me, and I've realized so much so that that's really now what I do for, with my life, is working with clarity and actually being a sounding board for people. But I remember that moment. I remember looking around and going, I feel like there's something different about me, which at the time I was very uncomfortable with. But now as I've grown into it, I realize I think it's that perspective. I don't know if that resonates with you at all, or, it doesn't have to. That might just be a bit of a difference in how I saw it when I was growing up.
Yeah, it's interesting. Mum always instilled in us that it was okay to be different and okay to be an individual. And so I think that's something that I always have, come back to, that it was okay to be different. So I think I recognized that I was, and I just embraced it.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, that's a really rich life lesson to learn when you're young. Thank you for sharing that. So, as time progressed, when did you? Let's start with the field that is your specialty, and I guess I would love to know how you became passionate about that area before you probably thought about leading people. I'm guessing there was a passion for,
Mm.
which you can speak to, about some of the things that you're most passionate about that started you on your journey. Um, so yeah, tell us a little bit about that. Where did that passion come from, and tell us a bit about the area that I guess is your specialty before we talk about leadership.
Yeah, so again, it starts when I was about 6 years old. I went for a blood test, and I was just fascinated by what they were going to do with the blood and what they could tell from it. So I sparked an interest in science from that time, and it kind of carried on. So I then remember in third grade doing an assignment on Australian animals, and I absolutely loved doing that project. It's so memorable to me. I remember what I learned about the koala and the kangaroo, and I think I kept that project. And I think I probably, if I went back to mum and dad, still find it in the cupboard um, there. So that's how memorable it was for me. So what I've ended up studying is basically wildlife genomics, so looking at their DNA, and um, it's kind of morphed over time. So I've studied different species, studied sort of different aspects of their genetics. But the areas I'm really passionate about is the Tassie devil and the facial tumour that they suffer from. So I've really enjoyed working on that issue, because it feels like I have an impact. So what I can learn can be passed on to potentially saving the devil from extinction. Um, so yeah, my interest really and passion really grew from when I was, in third grade, and that assignment. And I've just always loved working on Australian mammals.
What a fantastic thing to work on in your career. And there might be people outside of Australia who've never heard of the Tassie Devil, and I'd encourage them to Google it and and find out about and some of the incredible work that you're doing and you have done around that. So, when it comes to leadership, do you remember when was your first real opportunity as a leader? It might have been still when you were young, or it might have been a bit older when you had your first project that you really led, or you had your first group of people that you were responsible for managing. What comes to mind?
Mm. It would be when I was working at KFC and I was actually named a team leader. And I guess that's because the managers at the time sort of recognized that ability to bring a team together. And it's nothing, I certainly never sought leadership roles, they just always sort of came to me. Um, but yeah, I think it was when I was working at KFC, when I was a 16, 17-year old, that sort of started.
That's so good. And, I love hearing these stories. I can't remember who it was. I had someone else on and we were talking about the lessons we learn when, for me, my first job was as a 14-year-old. Well, I had two sort of first jobs. One of them was as a soccer referee, which was a wonderful challenge. Anyone who listens to all the episodes knows how much I love soccer. But also refereeing and being responsible for, initially with under 12s. And these kids who are only a couple of years younger than me and learning to manage that responsibility and getting paid to referee soccer games. But then I worked in retail at Amart All Sports, and as Australians might be familiar with, that I think has now merged with Rebel Sports. So it's amazing what we learn. But what did you learn at KFC? Are there any lessons that have really stuck with you from your time there when you first had your chance as a leader?
Yeah, and I think it's sort of leading for me at that stage because I was a team member as well as being named this team leader. It was recognizing that I was part of that team and to really try and lift everyone up. So helping each other out was really important. And I always had people who were willing to go that extra mile because I was willing to go that extra mile for them. And I think that's a really important thing is that a leader is not someone who tells people what to do, but is trying to bring out the best in people.
Yeah, that's so good. It's not someone who tells people what to do, but tries to bring out the best in them. I think so much of good leadership is actually summed up in that phrase. That's really profound.
Mm. It's
So
it's
as we,
how I do leadership.
yeah, no, I love that. I think investing in people is that, and I think that's where, for me anyway, the richest experiences have happened in my life has been when I've invested in a person. The work is that we do as leaders in terms of our work, whatever that is important. But wow, there's nothing like really seeing someone that you've invested your time and energy and finances for those leaders who are putting someone on a team and paying a wage to actually invest in that person is such a wonderful experience, very life-giving.
Mm. Mm. Yes.
So when it comes to your career, what about aha moments? As you look back so far, are there any moments that come to mind that were turning points or aha moments or the penny dropped for you when it comes to leadership? Something really stuck with you, something happened that just, you've never forgotten. What comes to mind?
Yeah, so I think there's been a couple of moments. So one of those was um, when I won a fellowship. It was quite a prestigious fellowship. And my director at the time, who I had very little to do with, because I was sort of, low on the totem pole, he came around personally to congratulate me. And that had such an impact on me. And I thought, that is true leadership. It's showing that interest in people, showing that they're valued. And I thought that's the type of leader. If I was ever to be a leader, that's the type of leader I want to be. And I always felt after that moment that I wasn't just a number. I was an actual member of of that faculty. I counted, and yeah, it was just a really eye-opening moment for me that, I've seen so many examples of bad leaders, and that was an example of a really good leader.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful story, and it's great because I always like to stop in these moments and remind listeners that you're remembering this however many years down the track. And what was involved? Was it an essay that was a handwritten essay? No, it was literally just taking the time to pop in and actually physically come and congratulate you on something. And the encouragement for all of us is that that's something any of us can do. And I always love it when something that simple has such a profound impact on someone like you, Janine.
And it's something that I do now. People have some good news. I try and go around to see them, and it's a little bit hard sometimes now that we're sort of got this hybrid model of working, and people are remote. So I'll send them a message, but I make sure that they know that they are valued, and I'm there. I'm noticing.
Yeah, that's so good. You mentioned that you how you learnt from that leader. Are there any other people over through your life who you think, yeah, they've had a really significant positive impact on your leadership as mentors or as great leaders or anyone else in your life?
Mm. Yeah, so there was actually an emerging leaders course that I did here at the University of Canberra, and they had um, most of the senior group of leaders in the university come and sort of tell their stories. And there was one in particular whose story really resonated with me, and some of the things she said about leadership were eye-opening to me because I hadn't thought of that, particularly that you didn't need to know how to do everything before stepping into that leadership role, and that you have to have some faith that you'll be able to pick it up on the job. And I thought, wow, I mean, I had just thought that if you wanted to be that sort of leader in the university, you'd have to have the experience, but how do you gain that experience, and so that was a real eye opener for me, and it made me sort of step out of my comfort zone and think, okay, I can take on roles that I probably wouldn't put my hand up for or would avoid because I felt like I didn't have the experience. So that really had a really good impact on me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Do you remember anything else that from that course, that any quotes that came out of that, any sort of thoughts that have really helped you since?
Yeah, that a leader has to have, you're not leading unless you have followers. Um, because I think there's quite a few people who want to be a leader, but they have no one following them, so they're not a leader at all. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, that was one thing that she said that really stuck with me as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and it's such a good thought. I can't remember the quote but there's a quote around that, around you know you need to check that people are following you, otherwise you're not a leader, you're just a person going for a walk. Something like that, which is always
Exactly.
stuck with me as a really great sort of phrase, around the importance of actually checking to see are people actually following.
Mm. Yeah, it was a really interesting course because at the same time we had someone else speak about their experience, and it was all about them. It wasn't actually about how to be a leader. And I thought, well, that's an example of a poor leader versus someone who really is a leader.
Mm, yeah.
So it really came through in that course. It was really interesting.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes someone said on this podcast to me is, the difference between a leader and a manager is that when you walk out of a manager's office, you think, wow, they're the smartest person in the world. But when you walk out of a leader's office, you think, wow, I'm the smartest person in the world. Like, there's a sense that when you speak with when someone's not necessarily, and they're saying a differentiation between leadership and management, which people can agree or disagree on, but the idea is that if you want to be a great leader, people shouldn't be amazed at how great you are and how smart you are. They should spend time with
Mm,
you and walk away encouraged, empowered, going, I can do this, and really thinking, seeing their own strengths. And I hear a little bit of that in that story that you mentioned, that when someone comes and it's all about them and how great they are in some sense, it doesn't ring true as great leadership.
Mm, yeah, exactly. It's one of those things, though, in academia, I think um, most of what we do, it's, applying for grants, it's sort of promoting our egos. And I think sometimes people end up in those leadership positions and they're used to it being all about them because they're used to having to sell themselves in grant applications. And so I think that's the distinction. You have some people that in academia that end up in leadership because it's about them, but then you end up with some of the true leaders as well, and they're often the people you don't hear about.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. Um, so let's jump into Leadership Express. It's been great to get to know a little bit of your story. I've got a few questions here which I'd love to ask you. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first of all, what's a book? It doesn't have to be about leadership, it could be about anything. But what's a book that you've gifted to other people?
Dare to Lead by oh, I've forgotten her name now. Um,
Brene Brown.
yes, that's it.
No, that's a rule of podcast that as soon as you're on a podcast, actually, I have this rule that every now and then I ask people for a quote, their favorite quote. And I have this theory that as soon as you ask someone for their favorite quote, all quotes leave the brain in that moment because it's like, if you think about it,
Yes.
what's my favorite quote? It's like all of a sudden, I say so many, there's so many different things I love, but in that moment, they all disappear out of your brain. So that's funny. Yeah, Dare to
Mm,
Lead, wonderful book. And how good is Brene Brown?
yeah, excellent.
What about right now? Are you in the middle of any books that you're loving? Are there any podcasts you're enjoying listening to, or blogs you're following?
I am sort of listening to the podcast by Patrick Lencioni. Um, I think they're called Around the Table or something like something around the table.
Yes.
And I just find they're just short and they're really valuable.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. He's probably my favorite leadership author of all time, and great podcast. And yeah, you're right. Very relaxed, sitting around a table, short, sharp, and really helpful and practical. So people should definitely check it out.
Mm,
It might be At the Table. At the
at the
Table,
table,
Patrick
yes,
Lencioni.
you're
I think
right.
that's it.
Yeah.
He also has a great podcast about his working genius assessment. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to any of those episodes, but it's the same group that sit around. It's slightly maybe a couple of different people, and they talk all about their assessment called Working Genius. And there's a whole episode on that on At the Table, but the Working Genius is about how we get work done. So that's another great Lencioni podcast if people are keen to find something new to listen to. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's fantastic.
Mm.
What's a recent leadership lesson you've learned for the first time or been reminded of, Janine?
Ooh. Um, I would say it's around communication, and that people communicate differently, and it's making sure you sort of tailor how you're communicating to how their personality. I just had a meeting today, in fact, where we talked about communication. And it was making sure that the entire team was on the same page, because communication is so important. There is no leadership without that really clear communication.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. I feel like communication nearly like it's probably not quite this simple, but nearly any problem either stems from, or maybe both, stems from a lack or miscommunication,
Mm.
and can be solved partially or even sometimes completely by improvement and good communication. Like I just see it so often in leadership. So I love that thought. What about, okay, here's another question. What's a great piece of advice you've received? Could be about leadership, could be just about something different or just life. What's a great piece of advice you've received?
That you create your own opportunities. And that's the piece of advice my dad gave me when I was a teenager and looking for my first job. And he said, we'll just go and knock on people's doors, turn up, front up, create that opportunity. Don't wait for a job to be advertised. And when I look back, that's pretty much how I've managed to get most of the positions I have is through basically creating that opportunity.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. I really love that. What's a big struggle or problem leaders in higher education are facing today?
I think that's around workload of our academics. I think, particularly coming out of COVID, so much has changed. The delivery of how we teach has changed. And so our poor academics are having to adapt to a whole new world. And a lot of that is online delivery, which they haven't been trained for. But at the same time, they're trying to keep up their research. And it's really sort of trying to manage people's workloads. So that's the real challenge as a leader at the moment is trying to balance that workload and make sure our staff don't burn out.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that that would be a big challenge. What have you found? Do you have any tips for people about how to find and keep great talent? How to find and keep great people?
Mm, finding and keeping great people. I tend to think that the best people you sort of see at work and you nurture them and you invest in them. So I know at the moment I have some young rising early career researchers who are making sure they're getting the mentoring they need, the professional development they need to succeed. And I think if they see that you're investing in them, they'll work all the harder. They will, rise to the challenges that come and do their best work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think investing in them, and you mentioned some great things there. What's a commonly held belief in, uh, say, let's pick science? What's a commonly held belief in science that you passionately disagree with? Maybe science academia.
Yeah. Look, I think part of it is that, what I talked about before is that ego and that you sort of need to have that ego to get ahead. Um, as I said, a lot of what we do, it's around selling yourself and saying how great you are. But I think you can do that without the ego. Um, and I would love to get to that point where people don't think of academia and they immediately think of that ego. And it's something that, I'm trying to instill in my faculty that it's not about how big you are in your ego, but how you display the values that we have in our faculty, which are respect, integrity, collaboration, and our people.
Yeah, that's a great thought. I think, yeah, it's really, and what a great goal. I know there'll be a lot of other people in your faculty and across the world in higher education cheering you on and joining with you in that path. And it comes back to Brene Brown, doesn't it? The vulnerability piece and humility is so key, not only to great leadership, but I think doing really great work. If we want to achieve some really amazing things, we do it better together by being vulnerable and having the humility
Mm,
to learn from one another and teachability as well.
that's exactly right.
Since I mentioned the quote question, let me see if this happens to you, see if they all go straight out of your brain. Do you have any favorite quotes? They don't have to be leadership, they could be life, they could be science, they could be any favorite quotes that you sort of close to your heart.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah, that's a good one. I love that one. And what
Mm.
about any movies or TV shows that really impacted you?
I have to say, The Blind Side. I just loved that story of the character that Sandra Bullock played and how she really understood um, you know her son, her adopted son, and his position on that football team. She was the one that sort of understood where he was coming from and put him in the right position. And I think that's so important, that we do understand people and not just judge them based on what we think from looking at them, but really dive down and see what they are as a person.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful movie, and Sandra Bullock's so fantastic in that, and it's a wonderful story. Last question. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say?
I would say to be yourself, not try to be someone else. I think it's easy when you're a leader to see other leaders and think, oh, I'm going to be like that. But if it's not true to yourself, you're not going to be a very good leader.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. For those who have really enjoyed hearing a bit of your story and getting to know you a bit, Janine, where can people find you online and also find out about the faculties you lead, about the University of Canberra?
So I'm on LinkedIn, and we also have the University of Canberra website. So, just look up the Faculty of Science and Technology at the University of Canberra, and I'll pop up there.
Brilliant. Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. It's been wonderful to hear some of Janine's story. Don't forget, for our listeners, I also have the Jonno White Leadership Podcast and Leadership Question of the Day podcast, two places you can continue to invest in your leadership. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to you, Janine, for being so generous with your time, for sharing wonderful stories from your career so far, and some wonderful leadership principles in there as well. It's been really wonderful to spend time with you. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me. Well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 Questions Interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jonno White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.